Do you and your partner want to learn simple ways to grow closer?
Do you and your partner want to grow happier together?
Do you and your partner want to be a unified front?
Do you and your partner want to divorce-proof your marriage?
If you answer yes to these questions, you need to check out our book, Unlocking Forever, 10 Keys to a Successful Marriage Beyond I Do.
Each section focuses on a different aspect of marriage and briefly describes how we handled it in our relationship. At the end of the section, you're given an action step or key to complete with your partner.
These keys are practical steps you can immediately implement in your relationship and help you and your partner be proactive and intentional about your relationship.
You can purchase your copy on Amazon.com.
And until next time, we will holler at y'all. After over 25 years of marriage, we've learned that successful couples have great friendships, put each other first, and focus on light just as much as love. We believe marriage should be fun and easy.
Our goal is to share our journey with the hopes of helping others build strong, happy relationships. Join us as we continue to create our lives beyond I do.
We are not marriage counselors, nor are we mental health professionals. We're just simply sharing y'all how we navigated through our marriage. Now, on with the show.
On this episode, we have Susan Goodrich. She is a transformational life coach, speaker, and trainer. She helps entrepreneurs create their dream life. She is going to talk to us today about self-love and let us know how we can present the best version of ourselves. So thank you for joining us. If you would, please tell us a little bit more about you and what it is that you do.
Well, thank you, Margaret and Brian, for having me here. I really appreciate this opportunity to share some of my little bits and pieces that I have from my transformational life coaching work that I'm doing to help entrepreneurs, mostly women entrepreneurs, to create a better life for themselves and a better business.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for being here. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. So we were talking a little bit about self-love, and I think it's really the foundation to everything, to having a better life. Because when we have self-love, it helps up-level our emotional frequency, our emotional vibration, where we really love ourselves. What I know is that when we're vibrating at really lower vibrational frequencies like shame and anger, in fact, shame is the lowest one. That resonates at about, 20 hertz, I guess it is. And it literally keeps us stuck. It's such a low vibration that it keeps us stuck. And so when we're not being kind to ourselves, right, we're not able to move forward. Right. And I find that with women who are working in business, one of the things that they struggle with is they put all these other things in front of before themselves. And what I know is that when we're in business, we are the foundation of our business. And so it's really important that we look after ourselves first.
Right. Even the move to start a business, you have to have a level of self-love and confidence to even step out and make that move. So, So if as clients come to you and they're in need of guidance, how do you start with the client to determine what it is you need to, or what area you need to focus on with those clients?
So we begin with talking a little bit about how they want their life to look. What do they want their life to look like? And they would have some, maybe not a pretty word, but an assessment that we go through that helps them just kind of rate where they are in these different areas of their life and their business. Because we're multifaceted. Our lives are multifaceted. And it's really a balancing act, not a balanced act. I don't think there's ever, there might be a real brief moment when it all feels like it's balanced, but, right?
When fleeting moment.
Very brief.
And what I know is that when we step into anything new, we tend to get really stretched, right? Or when we have to step outside our comfort zone, our being kind of wants to make us come back into what we already know. So yes, it takes a little bit of a stretch and trust in ourselves to be able to step out and take those steps into starting as an entrepreneur. And and even in building a relationship, right? We have to have trust in ourselves.
Right. That's one thing when girls start dating or young love becomes a thing, where you tell girls, you have to love yourself first, because how will you recognize that from others?
Right.
So in every aspect of life, that element of self-love is important.
Absolutely. And I can't even imagine what a poor young girl, when she hears that statement, thinks. Because
Right.
who knows what self-love is, right? I really struggled with that myself. Like, even in my 40s, even though I had a business, now I built a business inside another business. So when I stepped out, I was able to, I had confidence around the skill sets that I had. But suddenly I found myself really isolated, because as a solo entrepreneur, after having worked with 200 to 300 people in a company, and now I'm on my own, what I used to think were the enemies, I discovered were really my own.
Right.
Okay. Gotcha.
Right.
So, you said it's hard to even understand what self-love is. You talked a little bit about shame. So what types of things can trigger us to realize we're not operating in that self-love?
Well, those critical voices that we have, those little things that go off in our head. And I think it wasn't until I actually started to do the work around identifying what the lies were that I was telling myself, and some of the behaviors that were kind of really out of alignment. Like, have you ever had, especially around money? Money's one of those things that we all have issues around.
Right.
It's where we have great intentions, but then all of a sudden something happens in our life, and then we run off and we spend all our money to buy these beautiful things to fill a void, right? And so that's a sabotaging behavior. And what I know is that, those critical voices, which are lies for the most part, and are, sabotaging behaviors, get triggered when we're being stretched outside our comfort zone.
Right.
And how we really start to overcome them is we first of all have to be aware of them, right? That's the first step in transformation. And I have a 8 steps to lasting transformation process. And the first step is awareness. But the really great news about that is awareness is 70% of the transformation.
That sounds good.
Yes.
I was like, hopefully that brings a little help.
Right.
We're definitely aware.
Take a little break now.
So you're aware of them. And it's in the process is what I do is that when we become really aware of them, there are actually patterns. And I've seen these studies and worked with them as well and studied them. I've had one area where we were teaching them as 13 archetypes that for women, right, that show up, that infiltrate our psyche. In the one of the processes I do, they break it down even more, where we have 26 identities. But out of Stanford, they've actually done studies, and they've used something called factor analysis, and they've come up with what they call 9 saboteurs. So I can see the relationship and the patterns in all of these. And I've worked with all of these. So when I'm working with someone and I can hear their voice, like I can hear the self-talk when they're telling a story, and in fact, I had somebody yesterday that was doing just that, and they had, showed up at the swimming pool without their towel, and they were like, "Oh, I'm such a bad girl. I'm going to go off and get in the car." Well, that was not a very sweet thing to say to herself.
Right.
But she did manage to catch herself and go, oh, you know what? I can just go and ask for a towel and take care of herself, right? Because as adults, we have these skill sets. We have compassion, right? We do have compassion for everyone else. Sometimes we don't know how to turn it on ourselves. And self-compassion is the hardest one to learn.
Absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely. And so one thing that I feel like I'm listening to you, even with that scenario, I have beat myself up about the smallest of things. And to hear that other people go through those things, because for me, I feel like when I have a situation like that, like I'm just so dumb. I can't believe I did that. But to hear you say that no, others have gone through this, that kind of it almost normalizes the situation, which makes it easier, I'm sure, to transform.
Mhm. Yeah, it's easier. I mean, it's really the first step, right? You have to really be aware. And then, yeah, feeling like you're not alone is also really important because that's one of the foundational identities that we have is that I'm all alone. And when we do that, right, we stay stuck and we don't share and we're already in shame. And the only way to really move through shame is really to shine the light on it and to share it with someone else, right? So when we do that, then it starts to at least create some momentum, right? We realize, oh, yeah, I'm not alone in that. But how do I do that? So I just want to share a little story about how when I first started doing this work, because I had to do the work myself, because I believe that if you're going to be a good coach, you have to do the work yourself. And so I did this work and I ended up out of the 13 archetypes this was the first process that I did. Out of 13, I had 5 of these guys that were in, yeah. I had Superwoman. I named them. I had Superwoman. I had sometimes Betty Bulldozer would show up. Like, move, follow, or get out of the way.
I can see the visual of that.
And Vanishing Vanessa, you know, that whole visibility piece where we like feel really shy and we're hiding. Yeah. So yeah, and those are 3 that I can remember. They were really specific. They were really obvious to me, right? So the 3 that often showed up. And so, yeah, learning to have a relationship with each of those pieces and knowing that they showed up because they got created when we were little.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
They became our survival technique.
Right.
Mhm.
And we grew up, but still relied on those coping mechanisms.
So my understanding is that, you know, when they do show up, it's because there's a story or a situation, right? A current situation that's calling back a memory of something that happened when you were little. And that was the meaning that you made out of it. Right. The problem is that when you show up at this age, right? Like at this age, and you have a trigger, but the story got created when you were 3, you actually only show up with the capacities and the skills of a 3-year-old.
Right.
Because you didn't learn then how to, I mean, you were not able to cope with it.
Right. And so unless somebody else was able to nurture you through that and give you some other skills and saying it's really okay, that's an old story that still lives in your being. And so through transformational life coaching, what we do is we create kind of as though we're 2 people, right? We have this self in the body, and then we bring in this experience of our older, mature, compassionate, loving self and turn that towards this other part. But we have to actually be in that process in order to heal it. And over time, as we're able to do these exercises, that old story gets healed. You'll feel it show up, and because another situation happens and it awakens that part of yourself. But it seems to take the energy or the energy or the spark out of it, right? Once it's like a way of, I want to call it healing.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
And so obviously that can affect different aspects of your life, your career, your family life, whatever area of life can be affected negatively because of that unhealed trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That's been there.
Haven't we all?
It's almost an automatic thing. And like you just said, you have to get to the point where you're aware when those things come up in order to be able to stop them. One of the things that you mentioned earlier about money, and you said shame is the lowest frequency. And for me, for us, I think that resonated with me because, when you reach a certain age, when you have a career, when you are this, when you're that, you're supposed to have the money and be good with it. But the shame, if that's the underlying frequency, you're not able to open yourself up to learn to be better with it. That was a good point that you brought up.
And no matter what level you get to, I think if you don't grow out of that, you'll always feel the shame. Whether if it's, you can think you're doing fantastic, and then somebody comes along and says, well, I just saved $50,000 for my emergency fund, and you're sitting there like, well, dang, I only have 10. We were ashamed about those things. So you hear things from other people, and then well, I'm not on that level. And then, especially if they're younger than you, you're like, well, man, now I feel bad.
Oh, yeah. No, I know. I understand that. And that's that whole piece of being, in the conformity. We step into this place thinking that everything outside ourselves is what's, determining where we're supposed to be. And one of the things that I coach on is helping people become really inner referral and, choosing their own path and being okay with their own path. Right. But there's a whole piece of self-love. And I can feel the energy. I can feel the energy of your shame because I'm an empath. And so part of it is that I can actually feel it in my body. And it's as though there's an old story that somebody says, you have to be as good as these people, right? That we have to be like someone else. Instead of claiming who you are and your uniqueness and your brilliance. And I want to share something that I had learned. Somebody had said to me, because I'm at retirement age, right? I'm 68, and
68.
Blows my mind.
What?
And I don't have like a whole pile of money to retire on. Hence I'm still, and I have 14-year-olds at home, right? A pair. And
Fine.
You got to talk about that. You got to talk about that.
But what I learned was that retirement, because we all think we have this headspace that, I'm supposed to be retired now because I'm of this age. But when I learned that the banks invented retirement, think about that. Think about how that shifts, like where the banks created retirement. Why? So we could give them our money.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the truth is, before they invented it, people just always worked or they did what they did, right?
The importance of the self-love piece, because I am aware of a lot of things, but that self-love, that part is what blocks a lot of things for me. And so I'm also not driven by outside what people outside think. But so I'm at that point, but because the self-love piece is not where it is, it's like almost a conflict within self, because I'm not necessarily moved by outside, but internally I'm mean to myself.
Aw. Yeah. It's a practice. I mean, I know it, I struggled with it for years, and even still being aware. And it wasn't until I did the transformational life coaching that I learned these tools. And I have one of these processes that I use. I use it pretty much every day. I use it when I'm struggling with something. And it always happens when we're stretching outside our comfort zone, right? Something new shows up and we're like, oh, man. And the thing is, we are going to make that mistake over and over as we're first aware of it, right? We become aware of it. But I just started my program yesterday, and one of the first thing we're doing is we're actually looking at some stuff. And I said, okay, so when you look at this and you become aware of it, I don't want you to go into shame. What I want you to do is celebrate. I want you to celebrate that awareness, because that's going to shift you out of that place of being a bully, of beating yourself up, of going to shame or going to anger or frustration, or, that shaking the finger at yourself, right?
So after the awareness piece is there, where do you move from that piece?
Well, that second piece is what I call turning towards yourself. So in the transformational process, when we become aware, then what we really want to do is we want to turn towards ourselves and really tap into what that other part of ourselves is actually feeling, and reflect to ourselves what, that we see that we're feeling sad, or we're feeling frustrated, or we're feeling angry, or whatever it is that's not going well. And from there, well, then we tap into what our needs are. And after we tap into, right, because we're feeling that way because something's not going on. We don't have a need met, right? That's the thing. So we're not getting some need met. That's the truth in all of this stuff, right? So if we're not getting our needs met. And then I have a process where we drop into curiosity and wonder. And what's beautiful about that is that's really a connection really to the divine energy, right? To whether you call it God, universe, life, whatever you call it, right? It's that curiosity, and that brings all of our brilliance back online. Right. It brings our whole being back online. So now, as we get curious, we kind of wonder what it is that, how do I get that need met? Well, we don't even go to fixing yet. We just go to, I wonder how. And what happens if you're listening, your creativity will kick in, and suddenly, your creativity or something from the other field will kick in, and it will start outlining for you what you could do. And then now that you've got that, now you're ready to take action. Right. Because now you've got steps what you can do. The other thing that I learned in my coaching was something, and I think, Margaret, from, you're talking about, it almost sounded like you have the perfectionist, which is one of mine. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I still catch myself, but I catch myself. It's faster now, right? I don't spend days agonizing over it. I just like, ooh, there that is, right there. She showed up again. Okay, well, what's she trying to tell me? I learned a process called composting and harvesting.
Oh.
And it's where, when something went really wrong, you kind of go in and you pull out all the things that did go right, because we tend to look at just the bad stuff, but right. And then we take the stuff that didn't look right, that didn't work out right, and we look at it and we say, well, we're going to compost it. We're just going to give it to Mother Earth and let her turn it into, transmute it. But what did we learn? What could we do better next time? We get another chance. We're still here. And it's not the end of the world, even though it may often feel that way.
And so throughout this process, obviously, as you're moving through the different steps, there are times when you're going to get frustrated and fall back into those patterns. So how do you keep your clients encouraged, and then how do you help them encourage themselves in those moments where they may be falling back into those old habits?
Well, the falling back into the old habits really are the old stories. And when we can start to heal the old stories, so if you're doing these practices daily, as I really highly recommend, is that when you're doing the I call it emotional alchemy, but it's, there's lots of different names for it. But when you do this process, learning to turn towards yourself and learning how to have compassion, so that when you recognize, right, you'll start to recognize, oh, wait a minute, there it is again. And when you can name it, and that's what it's kind of fun when you do this piece and you can identify those saboteurs or those archetypes. What you can do is give them names, and then when they show up, you go, oh, there you are again. I see you. Thank you for showing up. What are you trying to tell me? Right? Because the truth is, they're trying to tell you something.
Right.
And then what we want to do is we can start to shift it. So it's like I said, it starts to take the charge out of it. Right. And in my program, because the last step of my 8 steps to lasting transformation are the practices, and I actually call it, because I call myself the good witch, practicing magic. And I was like, okay, so what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to practice magic every day. So in part of that process, so I have a program that I actually give them daily prompts for them to actually make sure that they're putting, connecting every day, just a little bit of what's going on in their process.
Right.
Okay.
And I would imagine that those moments, you embrace those victories, which give you more confidence to move forward and continue in that pattern, create new habits.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And the other process that we do is we also take a look at, what are our qualities, not just our skills, but what are our qualities? And we even take the ones that maybe we look at them and we say, okay, maybe we had some qualities. It's like, is that a good quality or not? But we learn how to embrace that, right? We need to embrace the good and the bad, right? And I know Byron loves you, and I'm pretty sure he's learned to embrace even the pieces that you don't, right?
Right.
In fact, sometimes those little pieces are the things that he may even adore more, and you may feel ashamed of, right? Those are part of what make you you. So we also go through a process of learning to embrace all of who we are, and we learn to become the person that we really want to be, right? Because this work really is about becoming something more than where you are right now. Maybe you choose to be a really kind and loving person in all that you do. And there are ways to do that. I mean, it's not like we're always going to get triggered. We're always going to, right? Something's going to happen, but it's how do we choose to be in that? And when we have the skills to turn towards ourselves and forgive ourselves. So in the process of shame, right? Forgiveness is a huge piece, right? There's a whole process.
Right. And it's not always easy.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy.
One thing that resonated with me, I was speaking with my therapist, and she said that, there's something that happens and then there's a consequence, and that's it. And she said, when you start to beat yourself up, she said, that's self-harm. And so for her to put it in those words and for me to think about it that way, that resonated with me. And so me being me, I was like, okay, I need to practice this, but I don't want a situation where I'm going to receive a consequence I don't like. And lo and behold, within a day or so, my son was going through some things, and I had the opportunity to express that to him. Situation, this is the consequence. Anything beyond that, it's self-harm, and we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So threat recognition, but also having something like concrete kind of helped me, because, like I said, I am my own worst enemy.
I used to be. I'm much, much, much better than I was. Yeah.
So what was your point or your pivot to move you from where you were into this type of work?
Well, I want to say there's a few. I remember about a decade, maybe it was a little longer ago than that. It was after I kind of almost always knew that I wanted to do something like this, even as a little girl. And then in my late 30s, I started working with a Jungian analyst, and I remember pulling a book off the shelf with about Marie Monfrance, who, was his colleague. And, and it said, oh, she worked till she was 96. And I'm like, that's the stuff that I want to do. But I really knew that I wanted to work with people. And I think it was, so I'll tell a little story about the, I think it was when my kids were really little. So just so your audience knows that I had a successful business coaching or training in the engineering field. I taught software to engineers and architects and that very technical world. And then I had children at the age of 53. So I had twin boys at the age of 53.
Bless you.
Thank you. On my own, no less. And I had always been able to sort of manage my emotions because I had always been kind of mostly on my own. I had my own space. And when things got really tough, I would just kind of, retreat and gather myself together and then go back out and be presentable. And I had a moment when my boys were about 2. And I mean, as a single mom with 2 2-year-olds, I don't know if anybody's listening who has ever had 2-year-olds, but it was challenging to say the least. And I'd lost most of my care. I'd lost most of my support system. And one day, this young lady that was supposed to come and look after my kids while I was off to teach at my clients didn't show up. And I was in a panic trying to get them because she would take them to daycare. It wasn't like she even had to look after them. She just had to be there to take them to daycare. And took them to daycare. And I was so stressed. I was so stressed that by the time I got to the office, something unfolded in the classroom and I was just, talk about miserable. And I felt so bad, but I didn't know how to change it. All I could see was when I got angry, would fuel it and just get more angry because that's all I knew. And it wasn't until I learned all these other skills and capacities to learn to care for myself. Did I know had I known those things when I had my kids, maybe when I first had them, I might have been able to show up as a much nicer person, but I was not a nice person because I certainly wasn't a nice person to myself. And we're always more hard on ourselves than we are on anybody else.
Right.
Definitely.
Right.
Definitely. I want to clear some things up before we go, because you said that you had twins on your own. So can you, for the audience, clarify what does having twins on your own mean? Because I don't want anybody to think that there was a man in your life and he disappeared.
Yeah, I know. I've had people say that. Oh, that wasn't very nice of him disappearing. No. I did IVF and I ended up having to use donor eggs and sperm. So they're basically test tube babies. I call them my designer guys. Because I got to pick the donors and created them. And because of all the wonderful information I had been given about having healthy children was I was able to create these really, they call them grade 10 embryos. So embryos are rated from 1 to 10. Well, they were 10s. Okay. And so when they were implanted, the doctor said, oh no, here comes your family because, I almost implanted 3, but something at the last minute went,
That is beautiful. And
that is beautiful.
Talking to you the first time and talking to you now, when you mention your sons, you light up, and that's beautiful. Because I don't know that I do that.
Well, that's because you'd already done it at a younger age.
And for those who are privy to, well, I guess they'll see the ads that we'll do, but they can't see that somewhere along the line you found the fountain of youth.
Yeah,
you drunk from it because you do not look a day over 50.
Yeah. that's stretching it.
I'm stretching it there.
And then you have the twins. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
I was surprised your hair is pulled out.
So
You transformed.
right.
I have transformed. Yes, I needed to do something for sure. I needed
You're a walking billboard for because obviously what you're doing is working for you.
Yes.
And so I'm just, like you said, you're an empath, you feel, and your energy comes through. And like I said, when you mention your sons, it comes through. So I'm in awe of all of that.
Yes, definitely.
So, and I'm sorry, you were telling us about your transition from working as a corporate trainer and then moving fully into your business.
Right. So I ended up having to hire a coach because my business did this after that moment of, not showing up very nice. Anyway, so I hired a coach and he was doing a great job. But what I recognized that there were pieces that he couldn't get me through. Okay. And I thought, I think I would really like to be a coach, but I knew that there were things that we could do that there had to be another level to this. Mm-hmm. And for about a decade, I had been following all these coaching and self-development. And I was like, why am I spending so much money on this? I was like, oh, just let it go. You're obviously really fascinated with this. Let's just go with it. And then I needed to transition. I needed to do something. It was COVID. I sold my house in Toronto. I moved back to my hometown. I was in a financial situation. And so I really needed to make a shift. But when I sold my house, it gave me the opportunity to have some extra capital, which I was able to invest in some real training. And so that's when I started doing work with Claire Zammit, Dr. Claire Zammit, who has a program that at the time she called it the Feminine Power Transformational Life Coaching. She has a new name for it now, but that's who I did my work with. And it's very steeped in meditation because we can't get to this stuff from our head.
Right.
Right.
That is a difficult thing. To just sit and be is very difficult. We live in such a busy, and another thing is being busy is like applauded. If you're not busy, then you must be lazy. So just the being able to sit with your own thoughts can present a struggle from time to time. And so we get caught up in all of those things.
Yeah. I have one of the things I've had for years is my morning practice. I get up extra early in the morning before my kids do and before they have to go to school. And I come down and I light my candles and burn my sage and ring my Tibetan bells and draw an inspirational card and listen to some meditation music just to really be in that place of peace. Mm-hmm. And what often comes for me, because I also journal at that time, is that then the creative flow, right? Because when we're calm and in that place of peace, right, the creativity just flows.
Right. You slow yourself down so it can.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a lesson in life because we're always on the go and we're always on the move. And without slowing down and without meditation, your brain can never really slow down enough for you to get. I think messages are always coming to us. Mm-hmm. And if you're not still enough to listen, and you'll miss whatever the message is that you need for that time or that period in your life. That's very interesting.
There's another thing that kind of comes up for me when we're talking about meditation. When my boys were about 2, I could not go out to the spiritual groups that even when they were little, I just didn't have the capacity to do that because I'd have to travel. But they opened a yoga studio a half a block from my house when my kids were 2. and I had to restore my body after having 2 babies. I'm only 5 feet tall, so you can imagine what I looked like with twins. And so I did yoga, and what I found was that by doing the yoga practices, I was able to really re-tap into it. And then at 62, I did my yoga teacher training, and I learned that yoga actually has 8 limbs. It has 8 limbs. And, we know them, we think of yoga as being the poses, but there are more than that. And what I learned was that yoga, right, the poses and the dristi and the breathing, right, the pranayama is preparation for meditation. And I knew that there had to be something between the body and the connection to our brilliance and and our spirituality. I knew that, like I remember one time I was sitting in a yoga class, and we were at the end of the yoga class and just sitting in lotus pose with my eyes closed. And all of a sudden I just was able to see the universe. It was so incredible. And I was like, so it really does, that piece of through the body is really important. And it is hard. Like if you're being busy, right, you need to kind of slow down. And so the one things about yoga is that if you're breathing, and I like to do a breath count as I'm doing the pose, right? Like as I'm, doing my sun salutation with my arms up and I'm breathing in with a count of 5 and forward fold to a count of 5. And that deep breath, right, is also helps us come back into our body, because that busyness, we're not here. Right? We're here.
Right. And even if with that busyness there, if we are not grounded, if we're not centered ourselves, we can't address all of those tasks that are making us busy in the best way. So there's a lesson in that. Prepare yourself for all of the busyness.
Yeah, that whole piece about being grounded and being really present in our bodies. And that's another thing that women really struggle with, right? Is that there's a fear base. A lot of times women are not present. And the thing is, when we're not present in our being, then we're open to be kind of taken advantage of. And so it's really learning to, and I had to learn to do that, because when we've had a lot of trauma in our lives, and trauma can be we've all had it at some level, right? Right. Anytime, it's kind of it's how we learned or interpreted something, is that's what causes trauma. But, we need to learn how to become present in our body and feel safe in our being. And through the meditations and through and again, awarenesses, right? Awareness when we're not present. And then how can we choose to come back into our body?
Now, do you think that there's a link between that self-love, and if there's a lack of self-love, then it's harder to be present within yourself? For instance, with me, like I said, I'm very negative. And so maybe that sitting, trying to reflect and go inward is difficult for me, because I'm thinking of all the things I should be doing, or I should have done this better, or what is wrong with you? And so to try and reflect and go inward, it almost puts me in a place of conflict with myself sometimes.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, it is. I think it's the awareness. Like you need to kind of be in the awareness and just learn to be, recognizing that there is a conflict and just kind of breathing into it. And then even asking yourself, is that the truth?
Right.
Is that really the truth? What I'm telling myself?
What I found works best is that then I'll kind of almost go back and forth with myself and tell myself, well, if that's the case, it's just going to be this way, and this is us, and we're going to move forward. So I have to handle myself, and that's the thing. I would never let anyone treat me the way that I treat me. And so sometimes I have to handle myself the same way.
Yeah.
Tell me, we're going to be nice and we're going to respect ourselves.
Well, great awareness. I just want to celebrate you for, being aware. I mean, that's the first stage, right? That's the first one.
First thing.
Like,
So, Susan, how for our listeners, we understand that there are people who live. We always hear people say, living your truth. So, how can you tell people the difference between living in falsehood and then living in their truth?
Oh my goodness. I have a little acronym for that. Did I share this with you before? I'm not sure if I did. So I have this little cheat card here to kind of step just so I don't forget it all. I call that living life with an open heart. So when I ask it, it's kind of, there's an acronym. It's like, are you living a false life or are you living a life of truth? And so to me, a false life is, and it's is an acronym. So F stands for fear. A stands for anxiety. L for lack. S for secrets, which are often shrouded in shame.
Yeah.
And empty.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And the body feels like it's contracted. We're in a protective state.
Exactly.
A life of truth,
Mm-hmm.
trust, and that's trusting in yourself, in life, and learning how to define your boundaries so you can trust in the right people.
Right.
Revived, where I talk about bringing your body back online so that your nervous system is calm, but yet re-engaged so that you are alive, right? And revived. U stands for unlimited abundance. So the shift from lack, and literally you can write these in a vertical because they literally go from fear to trust, anxiety to revive, from lack to unlimited abundance. And that's a mindset, right? Those are the stories that we tell ourselves. And this from the T in the truth, the second T is to tell your trusted team, tell your truth to your trusted team. So you're sharing your secrets with your trusted team. We don't tell it to everybody. We just make sure that we have the right people in our work. And then the H stands for happy and fulfilled. So we're living a life of purpose.
love it.
Right? So you're no longer empty. You're actually fulfilled.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it. I love acronyms.
Yeah.
I love anything that I can quickly reference. And so I can ask myself, is that false or is it truth?
Yeah.
And remind myself. So I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful.
Okay. How would you go about increasing productivity without being burned out?
Ooh. Well, you loved your acronym, so I got another one for you. Well, we know what the word flow, right? When we're in flow, we're really super productive. And, everything expands. Time, energy expands. So how do we get into the state of flow? Well, we use the emotional alchemy. So the first F, right? The F, again, is fear, right? So you're in a state of fear, an emotion, a resistance, some sort of emotion. So I want to use fear because it just kind of aligned. And so what you want to do is you want to recognize what that is. And you will also have to, again, reflect what you're needing.
Right.
The second, which is L, right? L in flow means to let go or surrender. And surrender into that place of, I wonder how.
Oh.
And allowing the creativity show up.
Right.
And eventually, because you've gotten the creativity and you've already got all those little tips, right? All the creativity's coming up, you know what actions to take. Now you're already doing it. You don't even have to think about it. It literally flows. I've done this several times. It's like when the house is a disaster and you're like, how the heck am I going to clean it?
Yeah.
And then I go through this place and I say, oh, I wonder what it would look like when it was all done. And I wonder how it could be. I just imagine what it's going to be like when it's all done. And then all of a sudden, I just am able to just, without even thinking about it, it just flows, right? It literally flows. But the last W, I think, is really important. And the last W is win. Wins and wind down. So we want to celebrate our wins and we want to wind down. And I've taught this in a class where I actually call it taking a bliss break. Go and take a break. Because when you're in, in the flow, right? At some point you're going to hit a wall.
Right.
And I don't recommend people to push through. You can feel it, right? But we are so accustomed to pushing through.
Right.
We do that, we reduce our productivity. What we want to do is we want to step into the W, which is wind down, right? Go in, take a bliss break, celebrate our wins, because most of us don't even do the celebrating our wins, right? Just celebrate all the little things that you just did. And when you're ready, now you're ready to come back to the top of flow.
Right.
And it really does increase your productivity.
Right.
And that's important. There again, that importance of that break and taking that time to recover and replenish. And it's not always a busy thing or that the hustle mentality, because at some point, even if not mentally, physically, at some point, your body is going to sit you down.
Yep.
So,
Yep. So I guess if I would sum it up, I think that when it comes to us as individual people, depending on how you were raised, we have adapted traditions or certain practices in our lives that continue to keep us stuck individually. So what I'm learning and I'm constantly hearing as we venture out into this world is that, the struggle is trying to break those cycles. So for someone who was very, let's say religious, I'll just use that as an example.
Yeah.
And they believe in following the scriptures to a T. And you come to them and saying, hey, you can live free. What are some of the things that you would tell them or share with them?
Well, they have to be willing and ready to make the change. You can't, you can bring as they say, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So, if you're questioning, if you're already in the state of questioning, is this the right thing? Right? Then you're ready to start doing the work. But until you're in the questioning state, you're not ready, right? And not everybody's ever going to get here, right? The world is evolving, right? It's we're talking about the 5D now. I'm like, some of us have been living there for a while, where the others are like, what do you mean? I live in Missouri, right? I can only believe what I can see, right?
Right.
Yes.
Right. So, and as we wrap up, what types of things can you, if our listeners, someone is listening and they're thinking, my goodness, so much of this resonated with me. What would you suggest that can immediately help them start to pivot self-harm, the inner self-harm? What types of things can they do to immediately make that pivot so that they can start opening themselves up?
Well, I would even suggest just hopping over to my website and grabbing my Emotional Alchemy PDF. I'm actually building a little program that's going to be more available called Turning Towards Yourself. It'll be doing more of an audible program for teaching people a little bit more about how to use this process, because I think it's really important. When we start to understand the frequency of emotions and how they are really important to creating a better life. I listened to a podcast this morning and they were saying the quality of our life is based on the quality of our emotions.
Wow.
Yes, I believe that.
Right. Right. Because your emotions are going to guide all of your choices and your circle and all of that. So,
yes.
And
I think that we're in a new age and everybody's seeking something different, which is the reason of my questioning. Because, in the States here, we know you're in Canada, but in the States here, we have politicians who are talking about quote unquote woke culture. And they tended to be, and I think that a lot of people have awakening due to the pandemic. So
there was time
they're seeking something more than what they've been traditionally taught. So that was the reason for my questioning, because everybody's searching for some answers that are deeper than what their mind can conceive. And that's the kind of information that we want to help people with to get to them. So that's why you're here.
Well, I hope the information that I've shared with you and your audience has been helpful. Even if it's just been a little bit of eye-opening, right?
Oh, yes, definitely.
And we are going to make sure and include all of your information when we post your episode. But you mentioned your website. So if you want to quickly let us know what your website is and any social media handles where we can find you and listeners can go and get more information.
Everything that you have going on.
Okay. Well, yes, I'm at transformwithsue.com. And that's SUE. So, so transformwithsue.com. That's where you'll find my website. And even there are all the social links as well. There is, I have a Facebook group. It's called Soul Solution Sisterhood. So if you want to join me there, that's also a great place to find me. Instagram, I believe I'm Transform with Sue. I think there's a couple of underscores there, and transform_with_Sue. And I'm also on LinkedIn as Susan Goodrich, and you'll find me there, and you'll be able to contact me through that as well.
Awesome.
Well, we want to thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Sue. Thank
you so much for the information. Thank you for sharing your story. We so appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's been my absolute pleasure and an honor to be here to serve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You have a blessed day.
You too. Namaste, as we say.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Beyond I Do podcast.
Please make sure to like this episode and also subscribe to our podcast. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at the Beyond I Do podcast.
And until next time, we will holler at y'all.